Questions 13, 14 and 15. By the 31st of August, over 84,000 UK businesses had registered for the Eat Out to Help Out scheme, and more than 100 million meals had been claimed for. By getting people back into the habit of enjoying a meal out, the scheme has helped to support nearly 2 million jobs in the hospitality sector and has played an important part in the Chancellor's wider plan for jobs.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My right honourable friend's Eat Out to Help Out scheme was also hugely successful in Beaconsfield, where 88,000 discounted meals were enjoyed. I cannot say what percentage of those meals were enjoyed by myself personally, but one can wager. And I just wanted to know what assurances can my right honourable friend provide the House that he will continue to support the hospitality industry through reductions in VAT for food and attractions until January of next year.
Well, I thank my honourable friend for her question, and I'm delighted the Eat Out to Help Out scheme has been so enthusiastically taken up in Beaconsfield, as it has been around the country. And I thank her for her personal service in this important area. She will know that the Chancellor's plan for jobs and support for over 150,000 businesses and the effort to protect 2.4 million jobs are all part of a package that come together. And of course, to them, as you will know, the government has also added reduced rate of VAT for tourist attractions, and that will run through until the 12th of January of next year. It all fits together as part of a wider picture of support for these very important sectors of the economy.
Double.
In St Austell and Newquay, almost 250,000 meals were eaten, not all by me, in the Eat Out to Help Out scheme, which put around £1.3 million into our local economy. So on behalf of businesses in Mid-Cornwall, can I thank the Chancellor for his support. August has been incredibly busy in Cornwall, but we do face a big challenge as we head into winter for the hospitality sector. So could I ask my right honourable friend if he would consider a similar sort of scheme to be run some point during the winter to help as many businesses as possible survive the winter and be here for next summer?
Well, I thank my friend for his question. There's a danger that we're going to see a bidding contest between colleagues for the number of meals eaten under Eat Out to Help Out, and I would dissuade them from that. But I would say that there is this wider package. Of course, the Treasury keeps all these measures under review, but it is a pretty formidable combination of VAT reduction, business rates relief, and of course billions in tax deferrals and loans.
Let us head to Lincoln with Cole McCartney. Cole McCartney.
Thank you, Speaker. Given the great success of the Eat Out to Help Out scheme in Lincoln and Lincolnshire and across the country, which has successfully led to continued and higher spending in restaurants, will my right honourable friend now consider further targeted support for other struggling industries such as the arts and tourism, both of which are drivers of the Lincoln and county economy of my constituency, not least the excellent Usher Gallery and Under Pressure Drill Hall in Lincoln?
Well, I'm delighted my honourable friend has been able to highlight the great work of the Usher Gallery and the Drill Hall. Of course, as he will be aware, the government has announced a £1.57 billion package of support for the cultural sectors, and that is designed and will support thousands of cultural organisations and arts organisations across the country, including theatres, galleries, museums, heritage sites, live music venues and independent cinemas. I think he will also know, though, that within that scheme priority is given to organisations, not just those with a national and international reputation, but those that are central to the cultural fabric of our towns and regions. I think that's a very important further component.
Dr. Jamie Wallace.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Eat Out to Help Out has been a massive lifeline for many pubs and restaurants in my Bridgend constituency. Some of them telling me that because of it they were able to remain afloat and keep people in work. What assessment has been made about the number of people in my Bridgend constituency, about the number of people and businesses that were supported by this scheme?
Well, I can tell him that 67 local businesses had registered for the scheme, and it had been used 53,000 times in Bridgend, which, while not quite the heroic numbers we've seen elsewhere, is a very important boost to the local economy. I'm sure he will feel, and have had the experience that all members across this House will have had, which is of walking into a cafe or restaurant and having the proprietor say, "Thank you so much, it's made an absolutely vital difference at a critical time of year for us."
Number 16, sir. With your permission, Mr. Speaker, I would like to take questions 16, 17 and 18 together. The government recognises the extreme disruption that the pandemic has caused businesses, and that's why we've delivered a generous and comprehensive package of support in line with best practices globally, totalling over 190 billion. This has included grants, loans, the furlough scheme, the self-employment income support scheme, deferred VAT payments, business rate reliefs, and protections for commercial tenants.
I thank the Minister for his answer. Would the Minister and the Treasury consider reviewing the rules of the furlough scheme to deal with some small businesses, like one in particular in my constituency, who missed out on the furlough scheme through administrative error and in effect paid staff themselves when they could have been doing them through furlough? And so I was just wondering if the Minister would discuss that with me separately and see whether we could review the rules to deal with this sort of administrative mistake.
Well, I thank the Honourable Friend for his question. Obviously, the scheme has helped 1.2 million employers, and that involves 9.6 million jobs. But I'm very happy to engage with him on the specific example that he raises. There is not an appeal process available for those who have made administrative errors, but if a mistake has been made as a consequence of HMRC, then there is a complaints procedure that can be followed, but I will follow up with him personally.
Miriam Coates.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This government's support for businesses throughout the pandemic has been wide-ranging, but also delivered at speed. And without the real-time information held by HMRC, it would have taken significantly longer for those grants to reach employers, and many more jobs would have been lost. Digital tax administration not only helps HMRC, it also cuts costs for businesses. So what is the Treasury doing to build on these successes and make the UK one of the most digitally advanced places in the world to run a business?
Thank the Honourable Friend for her question. She's, of course, absolutely right. It's incumbent upon government in all departments to look at how we can refine the way that we operate to be more effective. And that's why in July, my Right Honourable Friend published a 10-year tax administration strategy setting out our vision for a modern system. And that will involve extending making tax digital to more taxpayers as a first step, and will hopefully bring us to a world-leading situation in this country.
Bobby Croft.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've been told by businesses in my Scunthorpe constituency that the hospitality VAT cut was an absolute lifeline to them and helped them to continue. Will my Right Honourable Friend consider extending that VAT cut beyond January next year to help them with that recovery?
Thank the Honourable Friend for her question, and clearly every intervention has a cost, and obviously the support there provided for 150,000 businesses, protecting 2.4 million jobs. But as we approach future fiscal events, then all contributions and business cases for changes will be looked at carefully by my Right Honourable Friend, the Chancellor, and I'm sure he's heard your representation today.
Duncan Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Since number 19.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the House will be aware, in recognition of the extreme disruption caused by the pandemic, the government's delivered one of the most generous and most comprehensive packages of support around the world, a response so far totalling close to £200 billion. In addition to affordable government-backed loan finance, the job retention scheme and deferred VAT, retail businesses have also received specific support, including a 12-month business rates holiday for all eligible retail businesses in England and retail hospitality and leisure grants worth between £10 or £25,000.
Duncan Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Since being elected, I've raised many times the economic and social loss that online trading is having on our towns, our cities and on our high streets. And the pandemic has accelerated that issue. Surely now a VAT-style online sales tax is something that the government must start to consider.
Well, I thank the Honourable Gentleman for his question. As you'll be aware, many businesses, many offline businesses, are also, in fact, extremely effective online businesses. As Adam Smith almost said, we're a nation of virtual shopkeepers. The government's committed to a fundamental review of business rates, as you'll be aware. We've published a call for evidence in July and invited views on reform and, of course, also on potential alternative taxes, including an online sales tax. Our intention is very carefully to consider the merits and risks of introducing such a tax, and I would encourage all members, including my honourable friend, across the House to contribute their views.
Shadow Minister West Street.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. While a number of wealthier inner city areas have received over £100 million each in rate relief and small business grants, so many constituencies in the Midlands and the North have been left behind, some receiving barely a fifth of that support, or even less. Dudley North, Rother Valley, Blythe Valley, Don Valley, Penistone and Stocksbridge, Wolverhampton North East, Newcastle under Lyme, Redcar, Sedgefield. I could go on, Mr Speaker, but the question is this what the government meant by levelling up?
Well, as the honourable gentleman will know, and as my honourable friend the Chancellor has already highlighted, the intention of the government has been to support vulnerable people, vulnerable businesses, vulnerable families across the country. And, of course, as he's also pointed out, the evidence appears to be that we've been very successful, with the most targeted support being most heavily felt at the lower end of the income spectrum. But if numbers in the aggregate do not please the House, let me simply tell him the reaction of one chief executive of a retail business in this country who said to me that without the furlough scheme, they alone would have laid off 30,000 people. And with the furlough scheme, they've been able to continue and recover.
Helen Hayes.
Question 21, Mr Speaker.
Chancellor.
With permission, Mr Speaker, I'd like to answer this question together with questions 22, 23, 24, 25 and 26. The government has put in place a broad set of policies to support businesses and individuals through this crisis. The CGRS and SEISS have supported more than 9 million and 2.7 million jobs and people, respectively. As the economy reopens, we must adjust our support to ensure people continue to get back to work, protecting the UK economy and people's livelihoods.
Ellen Hayes.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The Institute for Employment Studies is now predicting 450,000 redundancies over the 3 months to September and a further 200,000 by the end of the year, more than double the level seen in the 2008-09 recession. Many of those whose jobs are at risk work in the creative industries, performing arts and hospitality, which without coronavirus would be thriving. Why is the Chancellor persisting with a cliff-edge approach which will inflict the hardship and misery of unemployment on so many people, instead of taking a flexible approach to furlough to save good jobs for the long term?
Chancellor.
Well, Mr Speaker, the furlough scheme, as it is currently constructed, is flexible. It was a key demand from business groups and unions, which we responded to ensure that as the economy is slowly reopening over the late summer and autumn, the furlough scheme has adapted to that, allowing businesses to bring back their employees in a flexible fashion, and that is exactly what they are currently doing.
Alan Kerr.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Can I congratulate my right honourable friend for the introduction of the self-employment support scheme in particular? But does he recognise that this cannot continue indefinitely? Does he also agree that the self-employed are some of the most innovative individuals in our economy and it's time to release their innovation to kick-starters?
Chancellor.
Mr Speaker, my right honourable friend is absolutely right. Now that we have begun to reopen the economy, it is right that our support becomes differentiated and the focus shifts on getting people back to work. It's not possible to sustain this level of intervention. I fully agree with him. Those who are entrepreneurial and self-employed deserve our support, and they will continue to get it as we drive our recovery out of this crisis.
Joel Jones.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. There are hundreds of thousands of people across the country, including many in my constituency, who've not been able to get support so far during this pandemic. The government has repeatedly said that it's too difficult to get support to people who are not on the coronavirus job retention scheme or the self-employed income support scheme, although the government have now had 6 months to put something in place. So could the Chancellor please outline to the House what barriers exist now to getting support to those people who have so far been excluded?
Mr Speaker, as I've said from this dispatch box, we have not been able to help absolutely everyone in the exact way that they would have liked, but that does not mean that support is not available. Through our considerable increases to universal credit, local housing allowance, we provided support to those who are the most vulnerable, and through things like our mortgage holidays, which 1 and 6 mortgages have taken up in this during the last few months, we've made sure that everyone, one way or another, can access some degree of government support.
Peter Gibson.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Over £33 million of bounce-back loans have been granted to businesses in Darlington. But many of the businesses in my constituency bank with new start-up, online and challenger banks and have faced some issues with accessing bounce-back loans. Can I ask my right honourable friend what steps the Treasury are taking to further assist access to bounce-back loans for those that need them?
Chancellor.
Well, my honourable friend raises an important point, and we recognise the vital role that alternative lenders can play in providing finance to SMEs, and we're continuing to work with them and the sector to see what more we can do. It is worth bearing in mind that, as he recognises, the loan scheme, the bounce back loan scheme, has proved enormously successful. We have so far accredited 28 bounce-back lenders who have provided loans to over 1 million businesses, and in the first instance I would urge his constituent businesses to look online at one of those 28 lenders and see if they can provide the loan that his business requires.
Shelmora.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And the Chancellor, and indeed all of us whose salaries have been paid throughout this pandemic, may find it difficult to grasp the deep sense of unfairness felt by those entirely excluded from any support through no fault of their own. Perhaps they followed their entrepreneurial dream and left a good job to start their own business, as encouraged by this government, but did not file their tax returns in time. Or they're an events business left to fend for themselves without any events. Thousands in my constituency of Newcastle upon Tyne Central alone. How can the Chancellor expect the country to come together to fight this virus when so many have been excluded from all support?
Chancellor.
Mr. Speaker, I respectfully disagree with the Honourable Lady. I think most people in the country recognise the government has provided unprecedented support at this very difficult time to millions of people and hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of businesses as well. And even though people may have not been able to get support in the exact way they would have wanted, across the spectrum, whether it's through the welfare system, through local authorities, or through the banks and the provision of credit, we have made sure that some form of support is available to the vast majority of the British public.
Tracy.
Mr. Speaker, it's now 6 months since 3 million self-employed people have been excluded and locked out from the coronavirus support schemes. And it is no coincidence that the Trussell Trust announced this week an unprecedented need for support, and nearly half of those people first-time users. And it looks like, if forecasts are right, it's only going to get worse, with 6 emergency food parcels being delivered every minute as we get to winter. So can I implore the Chancellor, please tell us, what are you going to do to support those excluded so this disaster does not turn into an absolute catastrophe for families around this country?
I think, Mr. Speaker, the Honourable Lady is slightly confused. On the one hand, she's talking about people who weren't eligible for the self-employment scheme. Those people were excluded who earned over £50,000, which was the top 5% of all earners. The average median salary of those people was £200,000. And in the same answer, she's talking about targeting support on those who can't afford food. She should figure out which one she cares about.
Shadow Minister Backpatt.
Mr. Speaker, when the circumstances change, the policy should adapt. Now, at a time when infection rates are growing, local restrictions are becoming more common, when this morning's unemployment figures show levels at a 2-year high and rising, particularly among the young, and when France and Germany have extended their employment support for a further year, isn't it time to reconsider this jobs cliff edge approaching at the end of next month, and at least extend employment support to sectors which cannot yet go back to work and areas hit by local lockdowns, so that businesses and workers are not punished for doing the right thing?
Chancellor.
The right honourable member is right to highlight the increase in cases, which is why the government has taken the steps that it has to ensure that we remain in control in suppressing the virus. He talks about local lockdown areas. He will have seen the announcement last week about extra business-grade support for those businesses that find themselves in that area, with a payment of up to £1,500 per 3 weeks of lockdown. And he did mention other countries. It's worth bearing in mind. He's right about Germany and their scheme, but it's worth bearing in mind in Germany they have had a scheme that has existed like this in cooperation with businesses and through their social security system for over a decade.
Chair of the PAC, Meg Hillier.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. As you might expect, the Public Accounts Committee is already beginning the reckoning of what this costs. But there is a cost to the Exchequer for all those people who were self-employed or employed on short-term contracts who received no support, because ultimately the state still has to support them and there is no tax coming in from them. So will the Chancellor go back to the drawing board and look at the long-term issue here of the cost to our country of not supporting people who have a good track record with HMRC, who could be supported, who have lived on fresh air for all of these months?
Chancellor.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I hear what the Honourable Lady says and will certainly reflect on it. And what I would say to her is, I think in response to the answer from my honourable friend, the member for Penistone and Stocksbridge, the importance of a digital taxation system, and it's something that I know her committee will have an interest in. Throughout this crisis, our ability to respond in the way that we would want is often limited by the information that we hold. And my honourable friend, the FST, has put out a 10-year tax administration strategy which will ensure that our tax system collects in real time the information we need about people and businesses up and down this country, so that should something like this happen again, the government can respond in the way that it would want to as quickly as possible.
Alistair Carmichael.
Number 29, Mr. Speaker.
Minister Nunn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Chancellor has regular discussions on a range of topics with Cabinet colleagues. As the Honourable Gentleman will know, the Government is committed to a fundamental review of the business rate system in England and has launched a call for evidence inviting views on reform. That review will also consider the merits and the risks of introducing an online sales tax.
Carmichael.
Online shopping offers a range of choice and opportunities for many of my constituents and other people throughout the Highlands and Islands that they just can't get from local shops. But it often comes with the whammy of delivery charges that often make the actual purchase itself look small, or else a refusal to deliver completely. An online sales tax, in fact, could be an opportunity to give a small tax break to those making online sales who deliver at a universal service, a single price across the whole country. Would the Minister consider that, along with his other considerations?
Minister.
Well, I'm very grateful for the suggestion, and of course, now that he's placed it in the public record, I'll ask my officials to look more closely and to engage with him on the question. He will know that we've already introduced, in a quite different context, a digital services tax. We are open to these potential ideas. We'll be looking very carefully at this area, and intelligent and well thought through feedback is always of great interest to us.
Samuel Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Question number 30.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Norman.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Speaker. The Government's been actively engaging with businesses and has been fully committed to providing them with information and support needed to prepare for the end of the transition period in Northern Ireland. As has been set out in the command paper, the Government's position is that there should be no additional process, paperwork or restrictions on Northern Ireland goods arriving in the rest of the UK.
Samuel Wilson.
Whilst I welcome the provisions of the Internal Markets Bill yesterday, they don't cover the issue that the EU is demanding of goods coming into Northern Ireland having tariffs imposed on them until it is proven that they have not left Northern Ireland and gone into the EU. And this is damaging to business because it requires additional paperwork, it will affect cash flow, and it will put up costs. Given that the Government is committed to keeping Northern Ireland in the UK Customs Union, and that the Act of Union says there should be no tariffs between trade between countries within the United Kingdom, and 75% of goods don't leave Northern Ireland once they enter anyhow, will the Minister give a commitment that in the Finance Bill he will ensure that the EU demands for these tariffs be collected will be removed so that Northern Ireland businesses are not disadvantaged?
As the General will know, these topics are very live matters of discussion at the moment between this country and the EU. I'm not going to comment on that, but I will say that we are very engaged with that issue as a government across a number of different departments, and we will be looking to support the principles and the positions set out in the protocol as we go forward.
William Ragg.
30